this on? I believe it is. You know, in college, I don't think they do this in high school, but in college, at least the Bill, you can correct me on this, but I think the students at least thought, maybe the students just made it up, if your professor's not there at a certain time, it depends on whether they're whether they're, you know, maybe their academic degree or their title, if they're a professor, an associate professor, just a teacher, instructor, whatever it is, you have to wait so long if they're late. You know, and if a certain time passes and, you know, the room clears out, everybody's gone. I wonder what it was on preachers. You were thinking maybe last week, how long? I thought I could get here at 6:30 on time tonight, which I did. It could come in, the room be empty. Well, why should we be here if he's not going to be here? But thank you very much for being here. And does everybody have a white card? Okay, do not put your name on this card. You know, a lot of times I'll say, okay, let's pass out an imaginary card, hold that imaginary card in your hand. This is a real card. And and you don't have to do this, but if you're willing to do it, write with your other hand if you want, so nobody can pick out, you know, your handwriting or anything, however you want to do it. But Sunday, I listed, we talked about, you know, no temptation is overtaken you that is not common to man, and I put up a slide that said, what are some of the common temptations? What are some of the things that people are tempted by? And if you think of 2 or 3 that are willing to just jot them down on here, you do not have to. I'm not asking you to sign it. I'm encouraging you not to sign it. I want you to be honest. I mean, I know you'll be honest, but and share whatever. And I'm not saying what are the things that tempt you. What are just some of the things that you know that are tempting to people? And it could be you, and it could be others. But just jot that down, and we'll collect those in a few minutes, and I'm going to be talking about temptation some more on Sunday, Lord willing, and would like to have. I'm going to actually have an opportunity to ask a number of college students before the end of the week to do the same thing, and we might just see, you know, some of the things that tempt us or try to get us off track or whatever, but we'll talk about that. May even talk a little bit more about it tonight, but just do that. We'll collect that before our time is done. Last Wednesday night, we closed the class by a prayer request that I had not intended to ask, had not planned on asking. You know, I even said, is the internet still on? And they very quickly up there, they do such a great job. They very quickly cut it off, turned it back on when the prayer was over with. But then, because I had not asked permission to share that, but you know, even though I know it would have been respectful for me to ask my daughter for permission, she is, you know, well, anyway, no, this child is not yet my granddaughter, and we just are hoping and praying that she'll be our granddaughter. But her name is Vella, and so they were going to court on Thursday, and a number of you asked me about it on Sunday, and they went to court, and Laura went with Vella. It was the same morning that they were all supposed to be coming to town, but one of our grandsons was tested positive for COVID, so they didn't get to come at all. But they went to court, and I'm not sure who was responsible for this, but somebody was supposed to bring the hospital records. She was 6 months old last week, and they were supposed to have the hospital records, and the hospital records weren't in the courtroom. And so they put the hearing off for another month. And so and that's we're just having to just be sure it's in God's hands, and this is a little false. In fact, there's no need. Wait a minute. Okay. Does anybody have the clicker? Is anybody up there with the clicker? Did I leave the clicker down here? Ha! And even a microphone. I need to look down here more often. Doesn't matter. That one doesn't work. I mean, it's not on up there. I'll let you see her yourself. And her name is Vella, and I think that was on her 6-month birthday. And I think she's in the 5 percentile of, is that it? I mean, she's one of the heavier children her age, I think is what that means. But anyway, she's very healthy, and she's very lively, very happy, young, precious little girl. And so anyway, we are just praying that God will take care of her wherever, and we'd love for her to be a part of our family. But we always pray as a family. We did it at Thanksgiving, did it again at Christmas, and all the time as well. But as a whole family, we prayed that no matter what happens here on this earth, we want to be with her in heaven. So Laura, who lives in Knoxville, and this would be their 5th child if they're able to adopt her. But they've kept a bunch of foster children in the last couple of years, and this one they took her home on day 3 from the hospital. So they're all she knows, and she has really won all of our hearts over, as you can imagine. But okay, we through looking at that? Is everybody through looking at that? All right. Here's what I want us to do. As I mentioned this to you before, I'm trying to really cultivate a daily habit every day. I mean, there's some things we do every day. We brush our teeth every day. We, usually we take showers every day. We do things there are things we do every single day, would not miss a day. But why is spending time privately with God not one of those? I mean, as old as I am, and as long as I've been around, and as many times as I've encouraged people to do that, still, it's one of those things that the things that are most important, that are most valuable, that are most significant in our lives are sometimes the easiest things to put off. Well, I just didn't have time this morning, and we read that little article out of the book "My Heart, Christ Home" by Robert Boyd Munger, and where they spent time reading in the living room every day, but then one day he was busy, and a couple of days he was busy, and he walked by, and there was Jesus still sitting in there. And again, the thing about that article that really hit me in the face, and that I had never really, even though I read that article back when I was in school, back when I was in college, read that little booklet, but I had never really zeroed in on this. We think that if we skip our quiet time because we're busy, or we've got a deadline, or we've got an early meeting, or we were up late last night, or whatever you want the excuse to be, if we skip that, we're the loser. Well, that's true to an extent. That's true to an extent. Last week, my grandsons, Cody and Ford, were scheduled to come down, and I had planned a bunch of things we were going to do, and I'd blocked the 2 days, Friday and Saturday, off on my calendar, and we were just going to have a ball. And my goal was for it to be the best time they've ever had with any grandparents anywhere. You know what I mean. But then, he had COVID. So, you think about that, and he told me on the phone, says, "Man, I'm sure sorry we can't come." But you think about that, who do you think was the most sorry? Who do you think was the most sorry? I guarantee you, they went about their Friday and Saturday pretty much just like they would have ordinarily. But man, I was thinking how much fun we'd be. I was the one who was really sad about that. I mean, they were respectfully sad. I was really sad. And so what Munger does in his book, he says, because Jesus is talking, and he says, what you need to realize is, I really look forward to spending time with you. Can you imagine? The creator of the universe, the one who knows all the stars by name, wants to be with you. It's not that he's just there, okay, we're gonna try to get with him because maybe we can talk him into something to help us. He loves spending time with us, and that's just hard to fathom. But it's absolutely the truth. So, what I've done, I've just marked a couple of things that I've read this past week in the one-year Bible, and we're in. Well, we just started Leviticus, but we're going to look at a couple of things out of Exodus in a minute. But also in the last part of Matthew, the next to the last chapter, and Jesus has been arrested. And Jesus is going through the process of being convicted in that sham trial that they had overnight. And he'd be crucified. When the sun came up, they would start moving towards the crucifixion. And it was just kind of all the things that the disciples said they'd never allow to happen were happening. But we go back in the 27th chapter, the 3rd verse, when Judas, who had betrayed him, realized, Judas, of course, being one of the apostles, he realized that Jesus had been condemned to die. He was filled with remorse. You wonder what had been going through his mind. Was it just the 30 pieces of silver? I mean, there's some people that give a lot of slack to Judas when they say, well, he was just trying to force Jesus' hand and put him in a situation where he would have to. See, there were some people who even thought Jesus was going to be the military leader. He was going to be the king of the Jews. He was going to really take over militarily, not just spiritually. And maybe Judas was one of those radicals who was trying to make it necessary for Jesus to show his hand and really take over, and if he's really the Messiah. But that didn't work. And that may not have, in fact, it's pretty clear from other scriptures, Judas was an evil guy. Judas was out for himself. But here, when he sees what he's done, he was filled with remorse. So he took the 30 pieces of silver back to the leading priest and the elders. I have sinned, he declared. For I have betrayed an innocent man. What do we care? They retorted. That's your problem. Then Judas threw the silver coins down in the temple and went out and took his life, hanged himself. Okay, I've got a question to ask you, and I want you to respond. Suppose that this had become a Joseph moment. And I don't know exactly if that's the best way to describe it. But anybody know what I'm talking about with a Joseph moment? What would a Joseph moment have to do with what's happening here? What was the Joseph moment? Pardon? What happened? Let's go back. I think it was a couple of weeks ago we mentioned this. When the father died, when Jacob died, and they're all down in Egypt now, and you've got his 10 brothers, actually his 11 brothers, because everybody's there. But the father's dead. They know what they had done to Joseph. They know how much Joseph has every right to be bitter at them. They wanted to kill him. They sold him into slavery, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they're scared out of their minds. And so what does Joseph tell them? He said, I know what your intentions were. You intended it to destroy me. What you did, you were focused on evil. But God used it for good. Okay, Joseph moment's probably not the best way to describe that, but suppose, okay, here's my question, I guess. Could the same thing have happened here? What do you think? Do you think that there was any point while his heart was still beating that Judas had no hope? Is that too complicated of a way to ask that question? While Judas was still living, had he lost all, not had he felt like he lost all hope, had he actually lost all hope? Had he committed the unpardonable sin? Isn't that sad? Isn't that tragic? I totally agree with you. I think he could have gone to Jesus. And, don't you wish he had? You don't? You're mad at him.
Somebody had to do it.
Somebody had to do what?
Jesus died for me.
Okay. But he already done that. He'd already done that. And he was, his role in the play, it wasn't a play, but his role was a tough spot, was a tough part. And you're right. Somebody had to do it. But I'm talking about after he did it. After he did it. And after Jesus is already arrested, after Jesus is already on trial, after they wouldn't change their minds, he goes back and says, "Man, I've implicated an innocent man." And they said, "We don't care. We don't care what you've done. We got what we want. Thank you very much." And he throws down the 30 pieces of silver and he leaves. And instead of going out and hanging himself, suppose he had gone to Jesus.
It reminds me of the prodigal son. I mean,
Yeah.
it would have been the ultimate example of that.
Yeah. Yes. I agree. I don't think it was too late for him to turn it around. I really don't. But he didn't. And but every now and then you'll run into situations where people have just given up. They think they cannot be forgiven. And they're hopeless. And it's not true. You're right. It's not true. Now, Satan wants us to believe it's true. But it's not true.
Everything Satan says is a lie.
That's exactly right. Are his lips moving? He's lying. So, that's right. Yes. What? Exactly. That's right. And I don't know for sure if he would have had access to Jesus at this point, but and they were all cloudy on what the resurrection really meant. They were not really, they didn't act like they really either understood what Jesus meant on the third day I'll be raised, or maybe they just doubted that. Things were probably going so fast. If Judas could have just waited to see Jesus face to face, and man, just if he had just fallen on his face right in front of Jesus and said, "Oh Lord, please forgive me," I just know he would have forgiven him, and I know he'll forgive us, and we need to be sure that we communicate that when we have opportunities, because a lot of people are just so burdened down with guilt and have such heavy, heavy, heavy hearts. And they finally just reach a point and said, I'll never be able to make things right. And that's as long as our heart's beating and as long as the Lord is on the throne, and that's going to be for always, we have that opportunity. Any other comments about that? All right. Let's go back to Exodus for a minute. Exodus 32. Now, Moses has been on the mountain for 40 days. And God had given him the 10 Commandments and a lot of other commandments. And he gave him the 2 stone tablets that he wrote with God's own, with the 10 Commandments were written in God's own hands. But then Moses gets word that things have gone pretty bad down below, because the Israelites were all down at the foot of Mount Sinai. And they, 40 days is what? Almost 6 weeks. And a month and a half. That's a pretty long time. They didn't have any, communication from Moses. They were wondering, why did Moses bring us out here? And what are we going to do? And so finally they decided, it's amazing, they just kind of took matters into their own hands. And they had their own little celebration, and they made their own gods. These were such fickle, such wishy-washy people in so many ways. But look at this. Finally, he turned to Aaron. This is Moses. He's trying to figure out what's going on. Now, just imagine this. Moses is the CEO. Aaron is kind of he's one of the first lieutenants. He may be the COO. I don't know. He's below Moses. But Aaron had been left in charge, and things got out of hand. He was in over his head. He could not handle it. He didn't want to admit he couldn't handle it, but he could not handle it. And it just went wild. So Moses comes, and he wants to bring order. And so he turns to Aaron. He demands, what did these people do to you to make you bring such terrible sin upon them? Now, Aaron's response is unbelievable. Look at this. Don't get so upset, my Lord, Aaron replied. And that's actually his brother, I think. Don't get so upset, my Lord. He's being respectful to Moses' position. You yourself know how evil these people can be, or how evil these people are. They said to me, make us gods who will lead us. We don't know what happened to this fellow Moses, who brought us here from the land of Egypt. Hey, we're giving up on Moses. That happened a couple of days after the Red Sea, when the water was bitter. And they said, why did you do this? After watching the whole Egyptian army get destroyed in the Red Sea. How quickly they changed. But they said, make us gods who will lead us. We don't know what happened to this fellow Moses who brought us here from the land of Egypt. Now, what you're about to read, if you haven't already read it, and you probably have, it's one of the most amazing verses in the Bible. So I told them, this is Aaron. And he still had a job the next day, is what's amazing. So I told them, whoever has gold jewelry, take it off. When they brought it to me, look at this. How could he say this with a straight face? I simply threw it into the fire, and out came this calf. That is ridiculous. And how did he, and he still, you see, God is a forgiving God. If he could have just eliminated Aaron, right there. But Aaron still had a job. He was still used by God. But what an unbelievable dereliction of duty. We threw it into the fire, and guess what? Out bounced this calf. Here it is. And so that's yes.
I think that's remarkable, what like you said right there. But what's amazing to me, it wasn't that long before that God had talked to, he called up Aaron and Moses and them, and then he said to Moses alone all the things that really he was going to have on the 10 Commandments. Moses told those of the people, and in Exodus 24, they said, all the words which the Lord has spoken, we will do. And I don't think that was much more than 6 weeks before this happened.
Yeah.
Everybody turned.
Oh, and the mob mentality, or the, following the crowd, or how quickly we can, 6 weeks or sooner than that. Sooner than that. I mean, it just seemed like a couple of days after the Red Sea. But, okay, question. Jealousy, good or bad? Bad. I hear bad.
God's a jealous God.
I hear God's a jealous God. So is jealousy good or bad?
Depends on how you use it.
Okay, on the context. All right, there's this passage in Exodus 34. You must worship no other gods, for the Lord, whose very name is jealous. The Lord, whose very name is jealous, is a God who is jealous about his relationship with you. Now, let's stop for a minute and say, how can that be? I mean, are we supposed to be, love it? Doesn't it say in 1 Corinthians 13, love is not jealous? But what does this mean? What does jealousy, what does jealous mean? Anybody want to define it? When you go after somebody else's spouse rather than the one you're married to? Okay, that could create jealousy, I would think, for sure. Okay, let me give you. I don't have the words on the screen for this, but let me give you the best definition I've ever heard for jealousy. And a lot of times I think people get envy confused with jealousy. They'll see something and they'll see when they should use maybe they get jealousy confused for envy. Is really what happens, and they'll say, "Man, I'm jealous because of the house that you have," or when they might really be thinking, "I'm envious because of the house you have." Jealousy is the fear of being replaced. Now think about it. Jealousy is the fear of being replaced. They hire some new whiz-bang kid at the office, and you all of a sudden get a little bit nervous and upset that person may be there to take your job, and that's maybe roots of jealousy. Or that's what's, but you're not envious of this guy but you're jealous. If somebody comes in and takes your girlfriend, you've been replaced. You get jealous about that. But he says, be careful about that jealousy. But why is it okay for God to be jealous?
He's the only true God.
Okay. He knows that replacing him means what for us? That we're not going to survive. We are not going to survive. And so he is jealous of us, and we ought to be thankful that he's jealous for us, because there is nobody else. There's no other name under heaven. This is in Acts 4, I think. No other name under heaven whereby we can be saved except for Jesus Christ. And God is jealous because he knows there's not a plan B. There's not an alternative. And so when it says that he's jealous, then that's, God has the right to be jealous, but we really don't have the right to be jealous, because that becomes, if you're you could be concerned about the condition of your spouse or your spiritual relationship, the spiritual relationship your spouse has, if for some reason they are being led to go in that direction. And so they're all but God is a jealous God because he knows we can't live without him. Now, in the 34th chapter or later, after Moses had been on the mountain carrying 2 stone tablets inscribed with the terms of the covenant, he wasn't aware that his face had become radiant because he had spoken to the Lord. So what did they have to do? They put a veil over his face because they didn't want people to get scared but his face just radiated. Where is that? Isn't there a passage in Psalm 34 where it talks about radiance? Can anybody find that word real quick in Psalm 34? I should have already looked that up. 34 verse 5. Okay, everybody, if you've got your Bibles and want to open to Psalm 34 verse 5. Yeah, that's it. Starts off, I'll praise the Lord at all times. His praise will always be on my lips. I will glory in the Lord. Let the afflicted hear and rejoice. Glorify the Lord with me. Let us exalt his name together. I sought the Lord. He answered me. He delivered me from all my fears. And then verse 5, those who look to him are radiant. Their faces are never covered with shame. Okay, you may want to keep your finger there. Turn over to, is it 2 Corinthians? 2 Corinthians 3. It's when he refers to this thing with Moses. Look at verse, let's just start in verse 7. 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 7. If the ministry that brought death, which was engraved in letters on stone. Now, what's he referring to? The Ten Commandments. If the ministry that brought death, which was engraved in letters on stone, came with glory. Now, with the ministry that brought death, how many people died in that little revolt that they had at the bottom of the mountain? When they had the calf. Does anybody know? Anybody want to guess? 3,000. The ministry that brought death. How many died? And you're right with 3,000. The answer is 3,000. Can you think of another time when the number 3,000 was used to describe the number of people that were added to the church? Pentecost. It's amazing. The ministry that brought death killed 3,000. But what happened on Pentecost was the new kingdom that saved 3,000. Complete turnabout. But he says, if the ministry that brought death, which was engraved in letters on stone, came with glory, so that the Israelites could not look steadily at the face of Moses because of its glory, transitory though it was. Even though it was temporary, it was still significant. His face was radiant. Will not the ministry of the Spirit be even more glorious? Now remember, we're in that realm, the ministry of the Spirit. And he said, if this happened in a ministry that brought death, think about how much more the ministry of the Spirit will be more glorious. If the ministry that brought condemnation was glorious, which is Moses' administration, or Moses' the law, how much more glorious is the ministry that brings righteousness? For what was glorious has no glory now in comparison with the surpassing glory. In other words, what we have now is so much more powerful than what Moses had. Now keep reading. Verse 11, what if the transitory came with glory? How much greater is the glory of that which lasts? Therefore, since we have such a hope, we are very bold. We are not like Moses, who would put a veil over his face to prevent the Israelites from seeing the end of what was passing away. They didn't want to watch that fade away because that could be very discouraging. But their minds were made dull, verse 14. For to this day the same veil remains when the old covenant is read. It's not been removed because only in Christ is it taken away. Even to this day when Moses is read, a veil covers their hearts. But whenever anyone turns to the Lord, the veil is taken away. And that would be us too. When we turn to the Lord, that veil is taken away. And he says, verse 17, now the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. And we all who with unveiled faces, us, contemplate the Lord's glory. And I love this next part. We are being transformed into His image with ever increasing glory, which comes from the Lord who is the Spirit. Okay. I really believe that God wants us to radiate. I mean, he says that. Those who look to Him are radiant. And here he says, in Moses, it was transitory. So they put the veil over, and the veil is still over people who read the Bible and don't really hear about what God's trying to tell us about Jesus. And I think he's maybe talking about people who don't accept Jesus as the Messiah. But he says we are being transformed into His glory from one degree of glory to another. Now, do you think you have ever known somebody, and sometimes I have actually used that passage on occasion, if it really fits, on occasion in a funeral service. Because I have known people who radiated the Lord just by their smile, just by their attitude, just by the way they lived their life. But they didn't realize it. You'd say, oh, you're such a blessing to my life. And they'll say, oh, not me. I'm not. You know, they don't. It's not that they, well, thank you very much. All right. I've really worked at that. Do you think this outfit goes with that radiance that you see? I mean, and that disqualifies you right there. Moses was not like that. He didn't even know it. He comes down and and he says, "What's the deal? What's the big deal?" And my guess is, I'm going to ask you to and if you could think of somebody, I'm going to ask you in a minute to just raise your hand. But somebody you've ever known. Somebody that you've ever known who really loved the Lord so much that it's kind of like it radiated, but they weren't all hung up on it. It was just so natural for them. Now, has anybody ever thought you knew somebody like that? Okay, several hands are going up. That's good. Wouldn't it be great? Now, and again, this is one of those things, it's not like, okay, I'm going to try to be that way by next week. But if we could somehow get just so focused on God, those who look to Him are radiant. We are being transformed to be like Him from one degree of glory to another. Are we, just a personal question, are we any more glorious in 2022 than we were in 2019 or 2020 or 2021? And again, that may not be a question we can ask, but do we know and sometimes you'll meet somebody and man, they are just they just radiate. It's hard to explain. It was hard for them to explain it. They didn't know exactly what was going on. Okay. Any other thoughts on that, Tony?
Reminds you of Jesus saying, "Let your light, don't put a bushel over."
Yeah. You are the light of the world, and don't let your light be hidden with a basket. Let your light shine, so that they can see your good works and glorify the Father who is in heaven. You know, things happen in the Bible where people who didn't really believe in God and weren't following God, they say there's no way they could have done that without God's help. And they knew Moses, there was no way he could radiate without the fact they knew he had been with God. And does being with God transform us? Okay, let's. I need to turn those cards over. I want you to pass those cards, if you will. Just pass them to the center aisle. And would you, Joe? Would you go get them from that section? And just nobody will know what you wrote. If you wrote anything, it's okay. If not, you just got a free card. Anybody else? Turn in? Okay. Great. Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to close in Psalm 34. Thank you very much. So we'll close with this, Psalm 34. And with the question, how can we live a prosperous life? And we're just going to read this and not even comment on it, and then we're going to be dismissed. And again, we're very glad you're here tonight. Thank you for your participation. Psalm 34. Okay, let me see. Where does this start? Look at verse 12. Whoever of you loves life, and if you don't love life, would you like to love life? I mean, say, man, I'm just not happy, or what? Wouldn't you like to turn that around? Whoever of you loves life and desires to see many good days. And hopefully that's true of all of us. What does he say? Keep your tongue from evil, your lips from telling lies, turn from evil and do good, seek peace and pursue it. That's just some good, practical advice to end our class on tonight. Go love life and enjoy the rest of the week. Rain tomorrow. Andrew's not here to tell us about it, but rain tomorrow. Have a great night. Thanks for your help. Yes. Thank you. I will. Thank you, sir. Thank you.